Maybe if I turn my microphone on. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's not news. That's just my opinion. And then we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's what we do here on the Wells Report. And sadly, we have sad news to start this broadcast. This came across just moments ago. Christine McVie, who played with Fleetwood Mac and wrote some of their most famous songs, has died at age 79, according to her family. This being reported by the BBC. The British singer-songwriter was behind the hits including Little Lies, Everywhere, Don't Stop, Say You Love Me, and Songbird. She died peacefully at a hospital in the company of her family, according to a statement. McVie left Fleetwood Mac after 28 years in 1998, but returned in 2014. The family statement said, "We would like everyone to keep Christine in their hearts and remember the life of an incredible human being, reviewed musician who was loved universally." Strange, I did not know this. She was born Christine Perfect. That was her last name. McVie married Fleetwood Mac bassist John McVie and joined the group in 1971. And now she is gone. And that is a pity. That is a pity. Christine McVie, gone at age 79. So, something else happened today. Actually, it happened last night after we left the air. Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes was found guilty of seditious conspiracy and other charges tied to his role on the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. This from USA Today. Rhodes and four co-defendants, Jessica Watkins, Thomas Caldwell, Kelly Meggs, and Ken Harrelson, were convicted by a Washington, D.C. jury. That happened yesterday. Meggs was the only other defendant found guilty of seditious conspiracy. Prosecutors painted the Oath Keepers on trial as ringleaders of the pro-Trump mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, resulting in multiple deaths and more than 100 injured law enforcement officers. The Oath Keepers are described by USA Today as a right-wing extremist militia group. They seek to defend, and they define them as seeking to defend its interpretation of the U.S. Constitution against perceived enemies, if necessary by force, this according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. When all else fails, the government lets you down. When there's no one there to protect you, the Oath Keepers are there. That was really their propaganda, their messaging, said John Lewis, a research fellow at the program on extremism at George Washington University, speaking to USA Today. But the militia members argued throughout the trial there was no plan to invade the building that day, suggesting the government had mischaracterized them through the lengthy proceeding. Until now, the Justice Department has not tried a seditious conspiracy case, defined as opposing the government of the United States by force in over a decade. The two Oath Keepers found guilty of seditious conspiracy could serve as a warning to government dissenters that violent acts against the U.S. will be punished. But the acquittal of a charge handed down to three other defendants could undermine the Justice Department narrative that the events of January 6th endangered democracy and emboldened the militia movement. The last time the government won a guilty verdict on the charge was during the 1995 prosecution of Islamic militants who plotted to bomb New York City landmarks. Today, the jury returned a verdict convicting all defendants of criminal conduct, including two Oath Keeper leaders, for seditious conspiracy against the United States. This according to Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Justice Department is committed to holding accountable those criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy, January 6th, 2021. That's a quote. Here's how the verdict came down. Stewart Rhodes, guilty of seditious conspiracy, not guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of a... okay, so let me get back to this. Not guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding, not guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties, and guilty of tampering with proceedings and aiding and abetting. Jessica Watkins, not guilty of seditious conspiracy, guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding, aiding and abetting, guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties, not guilty of destruction of government property, and guilty of civil disorder and aiding and abetting. Thomas Caldwell, not guilty of seditious conspiracy, not guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding, not guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties, and guilty of tampering with proceedings and aiding and abetting. Kelly Miggs, found guilty of seditious conspiracy, guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding, guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties, not guilty of destruction of government property, and guilty of tampering with proceedings and aiding and abetting. Ken Harrelson. I'm fighting with a cold. Ken Harrelson, not guilty of seditious conspiracy, not guilty of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding. I don't know why I can't say that. Guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging duties, not guilty of destruction of property, and guilty of tampering with proceedings and aiding and abetting. The Oath Keepers trial is the most high-profile case brought against participants in the Capitol riot so far. James Bright, Rhodes' attorney, told reporters after the verdict he believed his client had a fair trial, but thinks a different verdict would have been reached in another jurisdiction. The defense sought to move the trial out of D.C. several times before it began. In the government's 2.5-hour closing remarks, prosecutors zeroed in on the most weighty charge faced by the Oath Keepers, seditious conspiracy. They said, quote, "The evidence has shown that what these defendants agreed to do was by any means necessary stop the transfer of presidential power. That is conspiracy," unquote. Prosecutors also allege Rhodes, who founded the group, was an orchestrator of this conspiracy and the architect of the plan, emphasizing evidence shown throughout the trial that Rhodes coordinated Oath Keepers in several states to converge on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. For nearly 3 weeks, attorneys for the defense made their case, seeking to humanize the Oath Keeper members by pointing to age-related ailments, social media aversion, and gender identity as evidence they're not dangerous or calculating as the government made them out to be. Rhodes, the group's leader, took the stand in defense of himself and the broader group. In his testimony, he claimed the Oath Keepers who entered the Capitol on January 6th went off mission. "This was not part of our mission for that day to enter the Capitol for any reason," said Rhodes. Evidence presented during the trial revealed that just days after the Capitol attack, Rhodes tried to send a message to former President Donald Trump through Jason Alpers, a military veteran who testified he had indirect access to Trump's inner circle. In the message, Rhodes urged the president to invoke the Insurrection Act and be a savior of the republic. Alpers told the jury he did not pass the message along to Trump. Bright argued in his closing remarks that some 50 witnesses called throughout the trial could not say plainly there was an explicit plan to storm the Capitol or stop the certification of votes. "Not one piece of evidence that the government reviewed showed an actual plan," said Bright. 2 other defendants, Virginia Thomas Caldwell, and Ohioan, is a Virginian, Thomas Caldwell from Virginia, and Jessica Watkins from Ohio, also testified in their own defense. Caldwell told the jury about his physical ailments, military service, purported distance from the Oath Keepers. He's the only defendant on trial who was not a dues-paying member of the militia group. In an emotional moment at the end of his testimony, Caldwell broke down on the stand while describing his arrest and suggesting he feared his wife would be killed. Watkins unexpectedly took the stand to express remorse for her participation in the day's events and to distance herself from the government conspiracy charge. "At the time, I felt this was an heroic American moment where we, the people, were going to our house and going to be heard. I basically lost all objectivity. I was just another idiot running around the Capitol." But when asked directly, she testified she had no knowledge of any plan to overthrow the government. Representative Benny Johnson, the Democrat from Mississippi, chairman of the House Committee investigating the Capitol attack, and Vice Chair Representative Liz Cheney said yesterday the trial's outcome reflects the panel's own finding that extremist groups organized when Trump summoned his supporters to Washington on January 6th to protest the 2020 election results. Individuals involved now face the consequence of taking part in a scheme to undermine American democracy, they said in a joint statement. It's vital that there be accountability for every vile aspect of January 6th and the events that led to that day's tragedy. So, attorneys for Rhodes, Meggs, Watkins, and Harrelson are planning to appeal their clients' guilty verdicts, though Watkins attorney Jonathan Crisp acknowledged there would likely be an appellate nightmare. 5 other Oath Keepers and members of the right-wing extremist group Proud Boys also face seditious conspiracy charges that will be tried beginning in December next month. And so there you go. So I have to ask you this question. This begs the question. Are these people political prisoners? Are these people political prisoners or not? And why? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can call me right now. Are the people, specifically the Oath Keepers, convicted last night, are they political prisoners or not? And why? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say. Do you believe that the Oath Keepers, specifically those convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States, are they indeed political prisoners? Or are they arguably some form of traitor? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Or you can join us on the chat room. Mark says he's still waiting on the FBI to own up to how many operatives in what places were there in the White House or inside the Capitol before and during. Me too. Me too. Me too. I'm trying to figure out just exactly why seditious conspiracy has nothing to do with what happened on the Capitol. Seditious conspiracy happened before the actual Capitol attack. Why didn't they arrest him before the actual attack? 817-379-2172. Just asking. 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. Are the Oath Keepers convicted of seditious conspiracy today, are they political prisoners in the United States of America or not, and why? 817-379-2172. Or you can join me on the chat room at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you'd like to respond, if you happen to be watching this on on Patreon or Rumble, this show was recorded earlier today for replay on your time schedule. Send me an email. Put whatever platform you're watching into the subject line and ask whatever question or make whatever comment, and I'll make sure that people hear them tomorrow. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So, members of the Oath Keepers were found guilty yesterday in a Washington, D.C. courtroom. There are appeals planned, although there may be real problems with those appeals in an appellate court circumstance. That's according to one of the lawyers. We'll see. We know the FBI had agents and informers inside the Oath Keepers and another group months before January 6th. That's true. And like I said a moment ago, seditious conspiracy is not a crime that you have to wait for to have happen. Seditious conspiracy is conspiracy. In other words, if you're sitting around a table and you say, okay, this is how we're going to take down the United States government, and you actually discuss all of those details, so on and so forth, that's the charge. If they had those charges ahead of the January 6th demonstration, why didn't they arrest him? I don't know. I don't have any idea. I'm confused. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's say that I think that certainly some being held are being done so wrongfully. Those charged with misdemeanor trespass or parading should be released. Few are part of any violence, it seems. I agree to that too. So let's see what else. The officer that shot a vet should face justice also. I got to be honest with you. I have major problems with that entire circumstance. Where was this woman, Ashley Babbitt, demonstrating deadly force against that agent? It looked like an execution to me. Now, he's theoretically been investigated. He has theoretically been investigated and was lauded and magnified, in fact, for what he did. Really. Shooting a 14-year Air Force veteran. Huh. By the way, they also talked about in the actual article, USA Today talked about the deadly attacks. The only person that lost their life in the January 6th attack was Ashley Babbitt. The rest of them were natural causes. And oh, by the way, that does not excuse the 100 police officers or more that were actually injured. That doesn't excuse any of that. But once again, let's try to keep the news truthful. All right? Let's try to do that. And yes, indeed, no police officers were killed in the January 6th incursion. Not even the one that lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, which was nothing more than what I consider to be an incredibly embarrassing mistake done by House Democrats trying to make President Trump look as bad as possible. That was just mean-spirited and awful. And so far, nobody in the mainstream media has called them on it, and I don't know why. They should be called on it. It's awful. It's just plain awful. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. An armed veteran in Georgia helped Georgia police stop a fleeing suspect. He was armed. William Joyner, a quick-thinking manager at the Feeding Georgia Families and a military veteran, sprung into action yesterday evening in College Park, Georgia. A suspect being chased by police rushed through the food bank parking lot with a gun. After a fellow worker told him about the situation, Joyner grabbed his weapon, chambered it, and was seen on security footage rushing outside with his gun drawn and then confronting the suspect. I told him to go to the ground. The police are on their way. Just go to your knees with your hands up. Then he said, "Don't make me shoot you, because I will." Good guy with a gun ends another crime. Thought you'd like to know. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. More coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. If you find value in this show, do us a favor, support it. Share it with your friends. Ask them to subscribe to it as you subscribe to it. Subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, a like, whatever your platform allows. Those matter. We appreciate it. And if you'd like to support the show financially, you can do so by go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. That's patreon.com/The Wells Report. $1 a month. $1, $2, perfect. That's all it takes. Thanks very much for helping us out. I sincerely appreciate it here on the Wells Report. So I'm about to discuss some of the military duty that I have been engaged in. And whenever I do that, I always say the same things. One, I am a proud member of the Texas State Guard. I am not, however, a spokesperson for the Texas State Guard, nor am I a spokesperson for the Texas Military Department. Nothing I say should be construed as being attached as official information to either of those organizations. I'm a first sergeant of Alpha Company, 4th Battalion, 1st Brigade. I am proud to serve, and I have had the honor of going down and serving on the Texas-Mexico border. And while I was there, I ran across an awful lot of incredibly gifted, brilliant soldiers, some of them very high-ranking, that were going to be asked to leave the service because they refused the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, as you know, I took the COVID vaccine 3 times. 2 in the original series, and then I had a booster. And then I got COVID. And so, that being said, I spoke as someone who made a different decision than these soldiers. Some of them were moved to tears about the dichotomy that they were forced to deal with and endure. The dichotomy of the commitment to their service, commitment to their military careers, and then their commitment to what they believed was right and wrong for various circumstances. Some had problems with the actual manufacture of the vaccine and the ways that some human cells were used in that manufacture. Most, on the other hand, had a real problem with the fact that this wasn't covered under the Constitution. They believed that they were being subject to an experimental vaccine and that they were being forced to inoculate themselves against their will. What I did was this. I stood with them and I listened to what they had to say. And I didn't try to debate with them. I didn't try to change their mind. I asked them to clarify their point, to clarify what they're doing. There were some questions that I asked. And I said, okay, this one was the one that stuck out in my head. If you leave the service now, who will stand up for the soldiers, the junior enlisted soldiers, those soldiers that are below the rank of corporal or sergeant, etc.? Who will stand up for those people when this happens again? And I allowed as hell that, yeah, I disagreed with the fact that I was being forced to take it. Not that I was forced to take it by the Texas State Guard. That didn't happen. I did this totally voluntarily, and you can ask anybody watching this broadcast because they were there when I made the decision. So I took these shots freely of my own volition. And yeah, I'd do it again. I'd do it again. But these people are brilliant soldiers. And they're being asked to leave the service because they will not take these series of injections. And it is going to hurt military readiness. It is. I've seen it for myself. There are a lot of people under these circumstances. Now, as we have this conversation, more than 20 Republican governors are calling on Congress to remove and prohibit the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for members of the U.S. Armed Services. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee led 20 other GOP governors in sending a joint letter to congressional leadership that happened today, demanding that Congress revoke the military vaccine mandate either in the upcoming must-pass defense spending bill or through standalone legislation. The Republicans called the mandate unnecessary and raised concerns about service members resigning while the military is failing to meet recruitment goals. Quote, the Biden vaccine mandate on our military creates a national security risk that severely impacts our defense capabilities abroad and our state readiness at home, said the governors. They warned that implementing the mandate, quote, has placed our nation's military readiness at risk, unquote. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It does. About 8,000 active duty service members have been discharged from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps since Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin imposed the COVID-19 vaccine mandate in August of 2021. Very few applications for religious exemptions have been accepted, with the Army approving only 55 requests from active duty soldiers, one for a National Guard soldier, and one for an Army Reserve officer, according to the Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. In October, the Army reported a 25% recruiting shortfall, missing its recruitment target by about 15,000 soldiers. Republican lawmakers have cried out against the vaccine mandate, asserting that it is contributing to depressed military recruitment. However, the Army has noted that only 23% of 17 to 24-year-olds in America are eligible for service due to failing test scores, obesity rates, concern over sexual harassment in the military, and bountiful employment opportunities as civilians. In their letter, the governors observed the National Guard as of September was preparing to discharge approximately 14,000 soldiers over the next 2 years for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. As governors, they say, this is a quote, our ability to respond to natural disasters and conduct emergency operations is contingent upon the strength and size of National Guard units. As congressional leaders, it is your duty to provide for the national defense. Therefore, we call upon you to protect the men and women in uniform who protect us from an unnecessary vaccine mandate. As President Biden himself stated on September 18th, 2022, the pandemic is over. The letter comes as just 13 Republican senators sent their own letter to Minority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell, and other GOP leaders demanded that the Republicans refuse to advance the National Defense Authorization Act without a vote on military vaccine mandates. The effort is being led by Senators Rand Paul of Kentucky and Rick Scott of Florida, who unsuccessfully challenged McConnell for leadership in the Senate GOP conference. Quote, the Department of Defense COVID-19 vaccine mandate has ruined the livelihoods of men and women who have honorably served our country, said the GOP letter. While the Department of Defense certainly must make decisions that bolster military readiness, the effects of the mandate are antithetical to the readiness of our force. The policy must be revoked. I agree completely. I agree with all of this completely. It is essential that this mandate be set aside. It is. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of people that will be more than happy to stand in the gap left by those essentially being separated from service without their consent. But the broad irony of losing your military career without consent because you refuse to consent or you refuse to give your consent to a vaccine at the time, which was only available on an emergency use authorization, is just plain bad wrong. Now, you have to understand, the courts have already spoken on this issue. The courts have said that service academies, etc., cannot cannot end the military career of people who refuse to take the vaccines. I suspect that when more cases come forward, that will be the same kind of decision that we'll get from the courts. You simply cannot force people, anybody, even soldiers, to be injected with something that, at least at the time when it was going on, was not actually approved as safe and effective by the FDA. It was rushed into production. And since then, we have learned all manner of things regarding this particular set of vaccines. I mean, it came out in England that Pfizer BioNTech, never said that their vaccine would stop the transmission of COVID-19. It was widely assumed. That was big news here in the United States. What do you mean it doesn't stop the transmission of COVID-19? That is the point of the mandate itself. The point of the mandate was based on stopping the spread of COVID-19, at least on the part of Pfizer BioNTech. They never did any research to see that it would. They never said it would. And therefore, the reason for the mandate is absolutely bereft of any reality. That's what courts are going to see. I suspect that when all this is over, what's going to end up happening is there are going to be an awful lot of military people that are going to get an awful lot of back pay. It's going to cost an awful lot of money for a government that's already well over $32 trillion in national debt. Politics, very expensive in these United States, especially when the politicians making the decisions are essentially spending our money, not theirs. That lack of accountability thing again. We're in a situation here where it's starting to cost us. These political decisions are actually starting to cost us situations that are near and dear to national security. It's not something that we haven't seen before, but it's been a long, long time since politics has become more important than national security for the United States of America. We cannot allow this to stand. We simply cannot. You can't force an American to do something against his will. Indeed, there is an amendment in the Constitution that demands that all of us as a God-given right be secure in our persons. For me, open, shut. Case open, case shut. Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. That you are secure in your persons as a citizen of the United States. It doesn't say unless you're a member of the military. You are secure in your persons. That's the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. It's a God-given right. No politician can infringe on those rights. They are unalienable, not inalienable. You can't even say inalienable. Took me a long time to say inalienable. But the simple case of the matter is it's not inalienable. It's unalienable. There can be no legislation put against these rights. Unalienable. And so, why are we having this conversation? Well, I'll tell you why. You keep your eyes on all these cases. So far, the courts have ruled in favor of the people that were imposed upon, oppressed, if you will. I suspect that they're going to continue. But if you look at the text of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution that says you will be secure in your person, and then you look at the vaccine mandate, you'll note that these two pieces of paper cannot exist at the same place in the same time. It's as simple as that. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Yvonne points out the fact that the flu costs us almost as many lives We still don't know how many people died of COVID-19 because are you saying that suddenly, because of the COVID-19 virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, there was no flu that year? Actually, they are trying to say that. And we lose anywhere between 40,000 and 140,000 on average to the flu. It's listed as a comorbidity for people dying of COVID. Anyway, the flu costs many lives every year. There's a flu shot that helps prevent the flu, but it's not mandated. Correct. And I've gotten mine this year. Again, without anybody telling me to or lose my job. They didn't have to do it this way. You're listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. More breaking news today. Reported by CNN, the House Ways and Means Committee now has 6 years of President Donald Trump's tax returns, ending a years-long pursuit by Democrats to dig into one of the former president's most closely guarded personal details. The Treasury Department has complied with last week's court order to hand over the documents, according to a spokesperson from the Treasury Department confirmed to CNN on Wednesday. The Supreme Court declined last week to intervene after courts said the House had the power to request the returns from the IRS. The committee, led by Democrat Richard Neal, had sought 6 years of Trump's tax records, primarily from the time he served as president. That included records both about Trump personally and several of his corporate entities. The documents are not expected to be immediately released to the public. They are going to go through them and see if there's anything that they can use to besmirch the president's reputation. So we will see if they're able to do that. I don't know why the president didn't release those documents in the first place, but he did not. I pointed out on several times on this broadcast that I thought that was a mistake. And we'll see if it does indeed cost the president dearly, or whether this was a years-long pursuit of not much. Which, by the way, I would suspect, insofar as President Trump hasn't said anything about these things. We'll see. Mark points out, okay, a little cynically, don't worry about the details about the tax returns. They'll be leaked in a few days. Yes, that's probably true, but only the most salacious, damaging parts. See, because they got away. Let's see. The ticker says 11:29. Okay. Yes, this is live. Yes, I forgot to change the date again. Hang on a minute. I will do that. Yes, this is live. Oh, man. I am a bonehead. There's a checklist of things that's about a mile long, okay, that I have to do, and most of the time I get it right. Except, okay, so see, there, fixed. December 30th. Hold on. Let's see here. Okay. December 30th, right here. See? All right. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you pointing that out. I forgot. Let's see, what else was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Let's get to this. National Democrats are poised to upend decades of political precedent this week. They're gathering in Washington, and they're going to vote on a new presidential nominating calendar. They're about to change the primary system, one that is expected to finally bump Iowa and the Iowa caucuses from its first in the nation status. Members of the Democrat National Committee Rules and Bylaws Committee are exploring scenarios that would move New Hampshire or Nevada into the leadoff spot and bring a new state such as Michigan or Minnesota into the early voting window. The outcome is far from certain. Few expect Iowa, which has kicked off the presidential nominating process since 1972, to hold its coveted position after a disastrous 2020 caucus in which the party was unable to report results for several days amid a tangle of technology and organizational failures. The collapse fueled Democrats' rising concern the state is too white to represent an increasingly diverse party, prompting the committee to open its review of the calendar and of which states vote first. Wow. See, now what we're going to do is we are going to gerrymander the presidential primary process. That's what's happening here. Now, the party can do that if they choose. But I'm telling you that sooner or later, somebody's going to have the guts to do the right thing, which is to divide the country into 4 regions: Northeast, Southeast, Northwest, Southwest. And they're going to rotate 4 Super Tuesdays. That's it. You just need 4 primary elections. 60 days after the last primary election, the political parties have their conventions. 60 days after that, you have the national election. That's my plan. And each region gets to kick off the primary process every 4 years. In other words, they rotate through the regions. That's the only way that there can be true fairness. It didn't take them long to get around. I mean, it took them since 1972. It took them half a century to get around to realizing, no, wait a second, we can gerrymander these primaries, and thus we can have a completely different primary process. Okay. But it just doesn't escape me that the Democrat Party is now saying, well, Iowa's just too white. What would happen if, say, for example, the Republican Party said, we're not going to start our primary process in Mississippi because the state is too black? So racism writ large? Is that what we got here? Nobody going to call the Democrat National Committee for saying, well, you see, Iowa's just too white. Well, that's just too bigoted. That's another good reason for me to not be a Democrat, ever. Of course, they're not losing much. I was never a Democrat to begin with. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast today. This is hour number 1 in the books. Hour number 2 is next as we continue for Wednesday afternoon, the 30th of November. See you in a moment. Okay. And just like that, hour number 1 in the books. Back in a second, okay? North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We report honestly and fairly. I make commentary. That is not news, just my opinion. And indeed, that leads to debate because my opinion is just as valuable as yours. So let's compare them, shall we? News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. So, in 2016, there was this hue and cry that Russia had colluded with Donald Trump to interfere with America's national elections. The hypocrisy surrounding all of that was plain insofar as the number one interference in America's election is a biased mainstream media. And yet, that biased mainstream media was breathless in its coverage that Donald Trump was conspiring with the Russians to interfere with the election. And so that was the narrative du jour available to all of us. Well, that was all, I suppose, accepted as fact until recently. And what was the agent of change? Why, it was Elon Musk. Elon Musk has pointed out a startling statement that is currently gracing the front page of Fox Business News. Elon Musk says Twitter, quote, has interfered in elections, unquote. The subheadline, Twitter CEO Musk promises, quote, Twitter 2.0 will be far more effective, transparent, and even-handed. There you go. Let me give you the details as reported by Fox Business. Twitter owner and CEO Elon Musk acknowledged that prior to his takeover, the obvious reality was that Twitter has interfered in elections through its current and its content moderation policies. Musk's explosive assertion came in response to comments made by Yoel Roth, Twitter's formerly head of trust and security, who indicated the social media platform was not safer under the Tesla CEO's leadership. Roth was speaking at a Knights Foundation conference yesterday when he explained why he resigned from Twitter, accusing Musk of running the company like a dictator. One of my limits was that Twitter starts being ruled by dictatorial edict rather than by policy. There's no longer a need for me in my role doing what I do, said Roth. This according to Reuters. As the head of trust and safety, Roth was responsible for key content moderation decisions, including banning former President Donald Trump from the platform and suppressing the New York Post's coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop story. His decision to leave the company was part of a mass exodus of Twitter employees who left over disagreements with Musk's free speech absolutist vision, or were laid off in harsh cost-cutting measures enforced by the billionaire. Twitter's content moderation policies have been harshly criticized by free speech advocates, particularly on the right, who have accused the company of enforcing its rules against conservatives in a one-sided manner. The suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story happened in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, and was believed by many conservatives to have been motivated by a desire to shield then-candidate Joe Biden from scrutiny over his family's foreign business dealings. Quote, Twitter has shown itself to be not safe for the past 10 years and has lost users' trust. The past team of trust and safety is a disgrace, so it doesn't have any right to judge what is being done now. They had a chance, but they sold their souls to a corporation. One user commented on Reuters' coverage of Roth's remarks. Exactly, Musk wrote in reply. The obvious reality is longtime users know that Twitter has failed in the trust and safety for a very long time and has interfered in elections. Wow. Musk did not elaborate on how Twitter interfered in elections, but promised that Twitter 2.0 will be far more effective, transparent, and even-handed. Here is what Elon Musk has decided to do, and I hope he does it forthwith. He has decided to make public the decision-making process involved in what was obvious censorship of non-liberal, non-democrat content and candidates on the Twitter platform. I hope he does that. It's essential that he does just that. There are all kinds of implications for this. So Elon Musk takes over Twitter and points out that Twitter has interfered in elections. Well, let me ask you this. Did Google interfere in elections? Did Facebook interfere in elections? Because they have either more harsh or slightly less harsh content moderation practices in both of those platforms. Now remember, because of assertions that a foreign country was colluding with a candidate to warp the presidential election of 2016, we nearly impeached and removed from office a president of the United States. All those assertions were absolutely false. Now we have another president running 4 years later, and according to the available information, there is at least the basis for an indictment against not just Hunter Biden, but his father and his uncle, Jim Biden. At least the basis for a federal indictment. Now, will that happen? I don't know. I'm not a big believer in indicting presidents. Am I a big believer in indicting criminals? Absolutely. Hunter Biden is not the president of the United States, nor is James Biden, Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother. Do I believe that the Department of Justice, the FBI, or anybody in federal law enforcement could possibly move forward with such a thing, even though there seems to be abundant proof? No. No, I believe the Department of Justice is now a political action committee, as is the FBI. That is disaster. Can you imagine? The actual government agency charged with Homeland Security is nothing more than a collection of Democrats working to the benefit of their party. Can you imagine? The state police of the United States of America, the federal police, the FBI, nothing more than a group of henchmen for the Democrat Party? I mean, seriously. Does the FBI really want to be the enforcement arm of the Democrat Party? And if those words sound familiar, there used to be an enforcement arm of the Democrat Party. Do you know what it was? It was the Ku Klux Klan. Do we truly and honestly want to see the FBI put in a situation where they are compared to the other enforcement arm of a Democrat Party long past? Do we really want to go down that road? Of all the people that have screwed this up, the main drivers of FBI policy for the last 10 years, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, all of those guys, all of those people have maybe destroyed the FBI for decades. And how do you work through indicting Hunter Biden for what is a pretty serious case of influence peddling, money laundering, all of the things that go with it? How do you actually go ahead and indict Hunter Biden or the president? How do you do it? By the way, I said the same thing about President Trump. How do you indict President Trump? How does the DOJ indict President Trump when they did not indict Hillary Clinton? How do they do it? That's why people say, my God, they're going to indict President Trump and throw him in jail. No, they're not. If they had prosecuted Hillary Clinton, and had the same kind of proof against President Trump that they had against Hillary Clinton, yeah, we might see a president not impeached, but certainly indicted. But since we don't do that, we can't indict President Trump. If we don't indict President Trump, we certainly can't indict President Biden. Can't do it. Can we impeach him? Sure. Absolutely. Now we can impeach Hunter Biden. He has no connection with the government, theoretically. We can impeach we can indict Jim Biden. Again, same situation. But the DOJ and the FBI are now looking at an even bigger mess of their own making. They're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to impeach the brother and the son of the President of the United States. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do? By the way, Poker Monkey says the difference between Hillary and Trump is that President Trump is innocent. Yes. Yes, he is. Oh, John David, you're being partisan. What do you mean President Trump is innocent? What are you talking about? You see, that's one of the problems with investigating a guy for 8 straight years. Longer if you count the number of years that the IRS has him under perpetual audit. If anybody had found anything, he'd be in jail already. That's it. That's it. The difference between Biden and Trump is that Trump is innocent. Yes, he is. If he was not innocent, he'd be in jail already. Talking about President Trump. Are we going to throw Joe Biden in jail if he's guilty of bribery and all of those other things that his son certainly has to explain in a federal court at some point? I don't think so. I wouldn't support it. Why wouldn't I support it? Why would I not support the idea that no one is above the law? Why wouldn't I support that? I'm going to tell you next as we continue here on the Wells Report. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Thanks very much for joining us today. You can join us on the chat room. You can find that on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. If you're watching on Rumble or Patreon, this show was broadcast earlier, and I've got news for you next. Stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. We are talking about the fact that Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, has just plain said out loud that Twitter did indeed interfere with elections in the United States. We knew it was true, but we would have never heard from the former CEO, Jack Dorsey, that any of that was happening, even though it was happening. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. By the way, in case you're wondering, the former head of security and trust at Twitter recently admitted the social media company's decision to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020 was a mistake. During a sit-down with Fox journalist Kara Swisher, ex-Twitter safety chief Yoel Roth said that despite concerns about the authenticity of the laptop story, it did not reach a point where he wanted to remove the content, which was later censored anyway. Initial reporting suggested that Roth blocked user access from the October 2020 story, but the former Twitter division lead said the decision was not up to him. We didn't know what to believe. We didn't know what was true. There was smoke. And ultimately, for me, it did not reach a place where I was comfortable removing this content from Twitter. But it did set off every single one of my finely tuned APT28 hack and leak campaign alarm bells. It's true. You would have to look at that with concern. It's one of the reasons there's an editorial board at real news organizations. But Twitter isn't a news organization. It's also not a constitutional one. If it was a constitutional one, then the decision would have been simple. Well, the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech dictates that we leave that content up there. You see, if all these corporations simply followed the Constitution and Bill of Rights, if they just did, things would be so much simpler in America. But there are so many different ways of doing the same thing based on the fact that we, the people of the United States, have not decided that corporations doing business in the United States have to comport to the Constitution. That will change at some point. I can hardly wait to hear the arguments against it. Anyway, so they didn't know what to believe. True. Roth repeatedly reiterated that despite big tech companies' high alert status and his personal feeling of responsibility to protect the integrity of conversations from foreign governments who were attempting to interfere in our elections, it never rose to the level, the Hunter Biden laptop story never rose to the level where he believed the story should be censored. So it was a mistake? Asked Kara Swisher. And what Mr. Roth responded was, in my opinion, yes. Roth planned to meet with the Department of Homeland Security's now defunct Disinformation Governance Board, where the government was expected to ask Twitter to become more involved in efforts to monitor misinformation. Both Roth and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg revealed they were approached by the FBI prior to the 2020 election, warning the platforms about propaganda from foreign sources and misinformation. When the New York Post bombshell report was first published within weeks to go before the 2020 election, Twitter and Facebook were quick to limit or block sharing of the story in an unprecedented display of coordination. There's another name for that coordination. It's conspiracy. Former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has also admitted that the social platform was wrong to intervene in the Hunter Biden story. Last week, Twitter's new CEO, Elon Musk, said they might release more information on how the social media company censored the Biden laptop story. The Post was initially locked out of its Twitter account for weeks before being reinstated. The heroes in this piece, the New York Post. The other hero in this piece, Elon Musk. You know, this head of security left because he thought of the dictatorial edicts of Elon Musk. He should have quit when they censored the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. If you want to comment on anything that you hear on that broadcast, that's the number to use. You can also use the chat room if you'd like. The chat room's available on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, live between 2 and 5 p.m. If you're watching on Rumble or on Patreon, this show was recorded earlier today, and you are welcome to send me an email. TheWellsReport@Frontier.com. TheWellsReport@Frontier.com. And all I ask is that if you send me an email, that you put the platform that you're watching on in the subject line. That would be very helpful to me, because that way I know it's you. Okay? Speaking of the chat room, Kelly Lyons says, what's going on this cold and windy day? It's really cold and windy in Fort Worth today. Well, we're all freezing to death. Eddie Jones said the sun just came out in Eastern Virginia. It's about 60 degrees out there. Good to have you here from Virginia. Let's see what else. Mark Greer says sunny, windy, and coolish in northeastern Texas. I saw where it's going to be 71 degrees in Fort Worth on Friday. Yippee. Yeah, that'd be nice. It's been a little bit nippy. I got to be perfectly honest with you. It's been tough. I've said it before. Thank goodness President Obama could not get Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. He's doing plenty of damage at justice. Can you imagine that guy as a Supreme Court justice? Can you imagine? I don't often agree with Mitch McConnell, but in that particular case, I think Mitch McConnell had some idea that there was something going on with Merrick Garland. Because everything that I found on Merrick Garland seemed to be a straightforward, essentially centrist jurist. He is anything but that. That guy's a leftist radical. And I'm so glad that he's not sitting on the highest judicial platform in the land. Good heavens. Let's see. We were wrong administration. I don't know what that means, but only after the damage is done. Oh, you're talking about them finally coming up with all of this stuff that Twitter is now saying that they've interfered in elections after the last election. Yes. Mark Zuckerberg, for his safety, needs to avoid the 76108 zip code. I'm not going to say don't say that stuff, man. Shh. Let's see who else. Took 2 years, huh? Says Mark Greer. Yeah, it took 2 years. Got to get halfway through the Biden first administration. You see, the reason that we're hearing about all this is because the Republicans won the House of Representatives. If they had not won the House of Representatives, none of this would be talked about. They'd be talking about how great it was that the American people reaffirmed everything that Joe Biden stands for. That's what they'd be doing. But they realize that they put too many cards on the table when it comes to indeed investigating presidents. And nothing the Republicans do will face any argument or any real argument from Democrats. That's assuming, of course, the Republicans actually have the abject stones to move forward on those things, which they had better do, or they're going to be hammered by the Democrat Party for the rest of time, or until people essentially leave the Republican Party in such droves that it ceases to exist. There you go. Mark says, yep, it's preemptive damage control. That is exactly what we're seeing. Remember, what we are seeing here is we are seeing the most cynical and most destructive abuse of the media in the United States of America. Granted, it was not licensed over-the-air media. It was not media that was essentially the result of publications like newspapers and magazines. No, it was social media. It was something brand new. Did we miss the regulatory boat on that? We absolutely did. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long for someone to figure out how to exploit that lack of vision. And by golly, they did it. And so, what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to keep voting appropriately. And we better. Notice I'm not telling you who to vote for or which party to vote for. Just vote appropriately. Okay? That's not because I'm worried about one of these parties stomping on me. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less. As far as I'm concerned, I've got the Constitution on my side. I've got the Bill of Rights on my side. I've got countless Supreme Court judgments on my side. You know what? If they want to throw all that into the ash heap of history just to stomp me into non-existence, go ahead. Go ahead. You know, it's just plain ridiculous. What we have to do is we have to make sure that all of us who hear these words consider them carefully. And if you believe them, let them guide you. Stop voting for these people. And once again, I'm not telling you who they are. Because as far as I'm concerned, when I can make a blanket statement like that, well, we're talking about both political parties. In this administrative state, these executive branch agencies like the DOJ and the FBI and so on and so forth, they are worse than useless. They are worse than useless. They have turned themselves into cudgels to be wielded by the American left. And it's just breathtaking. Breathtaking in its hubris. Breathtaking in it's just plain brass. I mean, it takes a lot of chutzpah to do these things. But this is what happens when you don't have a real news media. When you don't have a real news media, this is what happens. You've always wondered why Germany went down the tubes. Why Russia went down the tubes. Why the Soviet Union went down the tubes. It's all because the media didn't do its job. Didn't explain the reality. Didn't explain the mistakes when they were small. And then tried to rationalize the mistakes when they were big. When it was too late. We're getting to that point here in the United States. There's an entire computer filled with what looks like graft and corruption, and the FBI's had it for years and hasn't done anything with it. They have a witness that was actually at the table when the Biden administration, the Biden family, made all these decisions. Again, he showed up with all that 2 years ago and they just ignored it. Now this political state of play is, okay, here's what's going to happen. What we're going to do is we're not going to do anything. The FBI is going to remain silent. The DOJ is not going to do anything. We are not going to pursue indictments. We're going to not do any of those things. And what we're going to try to do is couch this whole thing as nothing more than a Republican lynch mob. What's going to stop them from getting away with it? The suspicious incident reports from the American banks that are involved in all this. What people don't often realize about the FBI is that you can have two kinds of degrees to become an FBI agent. You can be someone who is got a law degree of some kind, a law degree. Do you know what the other degree is? Accounting. An accounting degree. And why is that? Because that's part and parcel of what the FBI has always done and will always do. Remember, Al Capone was not taken out of circulation for murder and racketeering and all of the things that he was doubtless guilty of. He was taken down for tax evasion. Well, that FBI did its job. The question is, will this FBI do that same job? I'm saying no. I'm saying they won't. I'm saying that the next play is to just frame all of this as nothing more than just a political tit for tat. A vindictive attempt to try to besmirch a great American president in Joe Biden simply for politics. And what's going to defeat them is the fact that so far, nobody's allowing the suspicious incident reports with the Biden name on them to be made public. All the while celebrating the fact, hey, we got Trump's tax returns. Okay, I agree. Got Trump's tax returns. Good for you. Now give us those suspicious incident reports. Because if it's good for Trump, it's good for Biden, right? And what has to happen is that we the people, but you represent that because I'm too close to it. The simple case of that matter is that we have to force our public servants into doing the right thing. We have to demand of them to do the right thing. And they will at some point when it's politically expedient. The question is, will the Republican Party flinch off of that? I don't know. But we need those suspicious incident reports. All the questions from all of the banks regarding all of these transactions. And there are over 140 of them. That's a lot. I want to hear the Biden family explain all of it. I want to see all the records. Because that's going to lead to a much different place than all of these imagined crimes that people have tried to assign to Donald Trump. This is going to lead to hard problems. Suspicious incident reports with Donald Trump's name on them? Anybody? No? How do we know? Because if there were SIRs from America's banking industry, they'd already be published. And they're not. What's going to happen is this. It's going to get too big. It's going to get too big to deny. It's going to be too big for the mainstream media to rationalize. It's going to be too big for them to say, nope, this didn't happen. I mean, think about it. One media source, Twitter, has already said that the American people deserve more transparency. They deserve to know the truth. That's Twitter. Sooner or later, the New York Times is going to have to say it. ABC, NBC, and CBS, they're going to have to say it, or they'll be out of business. Look at what's happening to CNN. CNN is barely making it right now. And they are trying to remake themselves. And they're barely making it. They are barely making it. I foretold all of this years ago. As soon as these people run out of money, they're going to destroy all of these amazing journalistic endeavors. It actually happened to the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos stepped in and saved the paper. And then didn't change anything. But it'll happen to him too. And maybe this is the catalyst. There are too many pieces of information, too many things that would either A, have to disappear to not be available, or B, that would be talked about and actually investigated and irresistible to move forward. Maybe that's why they keep trying to indict President Trump for something. I don't know. One thing for sure, This all stinks to high heaven, doesn't it? And it's all our fault. We voted for these people. We put them in office. We keep them there. It's awful. Yeah. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. There are some interesting little peanut gallery remarks that I'm going to talk about in just a couple of seconds. And I'll get to that in just a couple of moments. Until CNN makes the shows report the news and not colored with their views, they will not pull themselves out of the dumpster. I agree completely. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So let's see. Twitter is not the media. It's a social network. Then why is the left and the media so adamant about trying to stomp on Elon Musk as he tries to change Twitter into something fair? If it's not the media, why is the media so interested? I'll tell you why. Because they're culpable. They're culpable in all of this. There you go. Twitter is the media. Just because Washington screwed it up and didn't regulate it properly, along with Facebook and any of these other social media sites, that doesn't mean that Twitter isn't the media. Listen to the way that Elon Musk is talking about it. He's talking about it like the People's Town Square. That's what television is. That's what radio is. That's what newspapers are. That's what Twitter is. Thus, it's the media. That is what's going on. Let's see, what else do we have here? Didn't I predict that Rhodes would be found innocent because he never entered the Capitol? One more prediction gone awry. First of all, I don't have to answer your question because you did. In point of fact, what I said it was going to be hard to convict him for that because he never actually went into the Capitol. But then again, I also pointed out that seditious conspiracy didn't require him to go into the Capitol. Seditious conspiracy actually happened before January 6th. Remember that the FBI had infiltrators in this organization for months. Why didn't they stop it? Why didn't the FBI stop it? They could have arrested Rhodes and all those other people. Rhodes and I guess, what's her, Betts? No, not Betts. What's her name? I have it right here. Hang on just a moment. Yeah, there you go. Her name was... Hold on a minute here. All right, hold on. Okay, her name was Kelly Meggs, not Metz. Meggs. Okay, she was convicted of seditious conspiracy. Why didn't they arrest her before the actual event? You'll have to ask. You have to ask somebody regarding the decision by the FBI. But it sure stinks to high heaven as far as I'm concerned. Let's see what else. Obviously, the Oath Keepers didn't keep their oaths to the Constitution. Well, that's obvious to you, I suppose. I mean, let me ask you this question. Have we seen the United States government operate in contravention of the Bill of Rights? Yes or no? Yes or no? The answer is yes. We have seen the government of the United States operate in violation of the Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, First Amendment over and over and over again, Fifth and Sixth Amendments. We've seen all of it. So when the government just decides the Constitution is just too big a problem for them to deal with and they vote to disappear it, what's going to happen then? Since they're disappearing parts of it as time goes by, what's going to happen then? Answer the question. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let's see, did I make a prediction about BLM? I don't recall. You said Rhodes and his cabal would be found innocent. I said I'd be very, very hard for them to be convicted. I can't see why they're convicted, except, of course, they were essentially being tried in a Washington, D.C. court. I wonder how they do in a federal courtroom in Wyoming or Idaho or any place like that. Let's see. Did the FBI have the information before January 6th? Sure did. For seditious conspiracy. Remember, they were also tried for interfering with the duties of a police officer. Okay? The actual charges were, let's see. Obstruction of an official proceeding. They could have stopped it from happening. Aiding and abetting, probably the actual riots themselves. That would be gone. Guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties. That would not be there if they'd arrested them beforehand. In other words, most of these charges would not have been levied against them if they had been arrested for seditious conspiracy at the beginning. Further, if they had Kelly Meggs and Stuart Rhodes on seditious conspiracy. They had them. Okay? So, once again, I was trying to figure out just exactly, because nobody's really been charged with sedition for a very, very long time, especially American citizens. Sedition is kind of a very murky law to begin with because it runs afoul of the First Amendment. Do these people have the right to be able to sit there and talk about anything they want to, up to and including planning on some sort of harebrained scheme to take down the government? Apparently not. So does that set up a fight between the First Amendment and sedition? Yeah. That's why nobody's ever really been charged with sedition. Certainly not American citizens. So you say they were guilty, and a jury of their peers judged them guilty. Okay. Are the people in Washington, D.C., the peers of Stewart Rhodes and all these other guys? That's open to debate, isn't it? This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of seconds. Thanks very much for joining us. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news. Honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. In other words, we try to depropagandize America's news. That's not easy. It's not easy at all. I make commentary and we debate because my commentary is not the news. It's just as valuable as yours. So let's put it out there. Let's debate. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. What's fascinating to me is on this broadcast, we see a microcosm of America in general, which is people of the American left doing their absolute dead level best to defend the indefensible and doing whatever is necessary to be able to distract or deflect or what have you. Okay. So let's see. I pointed out in last hour where we were talking about the conviction of some Oath Keepers, et cetera, in a Washington, D.C. courtroom that I wonder how they would do in Wyoming or Idaho if they were indeed being tried in a federal courtroom there. And Isaac says whether they're in D.C. or Idaho, Americans made the decision based on federal law. Maybe Rhodes should have thought about his words and actions before committing treason. Well, he didn't commit treason. He committed seditious conspiracy, according to the jury. That's not treason. See how quickly things can warp out of control? Just pointing it out. Let's see. Battling with bronchitis. It's knocking me on my butt. I have drugs. Catch y'all tomorrow. God bless you all. Mark Meadows has to testify in Georgia. The courts ruled Graham had to testify. Steve Miller gave his statements. In 15 years, the history books will record the big coup in this country by Donald Trump. Okay, how about the big coup in this country by James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, John Brennan, James Clapper? How about that big coup? Because that actually was a coup. I'm still trying to figure out how somebody saying, let's go to the Capitol building and let them hear us in a peaceful manner, how that turns into a coup. You can't explain it, can you? You're proving my point. You keep rationalizing anything left. And then, of course, predictably, when I point this out at the beginning of the hour, Isaac says, oh, have a great rest of your day. Yeah, the drive-by media. Yeah. And so while he's gone, I can at least explain it to you. Let me explain how difficult it is. How difficult it is to get anything having to do with Donald Trump before the actual record. In this particular case, Ted Cruz here, let me give you all the details here. Ted Cruz is essentially working as hard as he can to try to get something out there. Let's see, hold on. Let me find it for you. Oh, that's yesterday's. That's why I can't find it. I'm sitting here looking at this going, wait a minute, hold on a second. Wait a minute. I know that thing's here. Here we go. Let me give you this. All right. New Hampshire Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz got into a heated exchange yesterday after Shaheen shut down Cruz's questions for an ambassador nominee concerning allegations that then Vice President Joe Biden pressured Ukrainian officials to fire the country's top prosecutor in 2016. Cruz accused the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairwoman of covering for Biden after Shaheen prevented nominee George Kent from answering his question during a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. Kent, who is President Biden's choice to be the next ambassador to Estonia, has previously testified as a witness during former President Trump's first impeachment inquiry and told lawmakers he raised concerns about Hunter Biden's lucrative service on the board of a Ukrainian natural gas company, only to be rebuffed by the Biden administration. So let me ask you this. You want to see it? Well, by all means, let's take a look, shall we? This is pretty amazing. And they did it to me again. All right. See, once again, you see, what happens is this, is I look this stuff over, and then when I try to put it on the air, it then shows me a commercial. Okay, here we go. Let's get this working.
Interesting. Someone who disagrees with you, Mr. Kent, is Joe Biden. And I want to read from what he said on January 23rd, 2018 at the Council of Foreign Relations. Quote, this is Joe Biden speaking. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kiev. And I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I'd gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, the prosecutor that was investigating Burisma. And they didn't. So Biden continues. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was about 6 hours. I looked at them and said, I'm leaving here in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, he got fired. Let me ask you something. Do you think Joe Biden holding $1 billion hostage to force the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor that is investigating the corrupt oligarch who's paying his son $1 million a year, did getting that prosecutor fired benefit that oligarch?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Van
Are you going to
Hollen.
allow him to answer the question, Madam Chairman?
I am not going to allow him to answer the question.
Why are you covering for the
Holland.
vice president? Do you not
I'm
want
not-
him to answer that question? He said that the vice president does nothing to benefit
I
the
think it's
oligarch.
unfortunate for you, Senator Cruz, to put in position that are uncomfortable the nominees to be our ambassadors.
Okay, this is
because
his
they
sworn
have-
testimony. This
I
is his sworn
appreciate that,
testimony.
and
I
he-
understand that
and
you
he
want to cover
already
for the vice
answered
president.
that he is going to raise those concerns anytime.
Was his testimony
has
true or false that
responsibility.
Biden did nothing to benefit the oligarch?
I don't know
Let him
what his
answer the
testimony
question.
was.
Why are you afraid of him answering the question?
I'm not. I just want to move on
But
because
you won't let him answer.
votes
I
have
asked
started.
a yes/no question. Will you allow him to answer the yes/no question?
Yes, you can answer yes or no. Thank you.
The prosecutor who was fired by the Ukrainian parliament did nothing to investigate Zlochevsky, and everything that Vice President Biden, the State Department, and the U.S. Embassy did acted in good faith to reduce corruption and help the Ukrainian
So
people.
firing him did not benefit the oligarch.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Van Hollen.
You're protecting the president well.
Thank you.
All right. And so there you go. What's fascinating to me on this particular circumstance is the immediate reflexive knee-jerk response from a leftist here on the chat room. Cruz is a Texas embarrassment. You know that everything that Ted Cruz was talking about is in a matter of public record, right? You do know that President Trump was impeached for essentially trying to make a deal very much like the one that Vice President Biden was making regarding the prosecutors supposedly looking into Burisma. You do know that, right? Or no? You see, they had an opportunity to put that guy on the record. Now he did. He said, no, that wasn't the case. And what the vice president did was fine. Well, he's going to have to answer that question again. He's going to have to answer that question again when the Republicans take over the House of Representatives. But now let's take a look at what we just saw. What we just saw was a mistake by Representative Jeanne Shaheen. This was a mistake because what she did was she indeed did exactly what Senator Cruz said she did. She just covered for the then vice president and now president of the United States in a situation where eerily similar to a situation that cost President Trump an impeachment and almost his removal from office. So does that mean that what we need to do is we need to chase this down and impeach and almost remove President Biden for virtually the same thing? Except this time, we don't have to rely on people who said they actually were in a meeting that weren't in a meeting, that said they heard it from somebody in a meeting, which is hearsay, which is not legal, but works in an impeachment hearing. We have videotape of the vice president saying it himself. And the only way to stop that testimony from being put on the record without any kind of interruption is for Jeanne Shaheen to say, oh, there are votes going on, we have to stop. You see, and then, of course, somebody comes up and says, my good grief, Senator Cruz is a Texas embarrassment. No, he's not. He's an American senator trying to get to the bottom of a real difficult question. You know, everybody in the Republican Party looks at their party and says, my goodness gracious, as they said in the Babylon Bee, the Republican Party did a magnificent job in avoiding the red wave in the 2022 election. That's completely true. Absolutely true. And so when you sit there and you say that Republicans are gutless and won't do anything against, say, for example, I don't know, the political opposition, when somebody actually stands up to do so, oh, they're an embarrassment. That's how you destroy a country, by the way. That's how you do it. You ignore abject reality, and you simply just ignore it. In point of fact, the gas company Burisma Holdings was under investigation in 2016 by Ukraine's top prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, who himself faced allegations of corruption. Which came first, his investigation of Burisma or the allegations of corruption he was facing? Which is it? In 2018, Biden admitted that while he was vice president, he pushed Ukrainian officials to fire Shokin by threatening to cancel $1 billion of loan guarantees. What was the conversation between Zelensky and President Trump? Didn't it say something about holding up money for whatever reason? My God, that was terrible. And that's something that they impeached President Trump for? I'm just asking questions. That's what I'm trying to do. Do you think Joe Biden holding $1 billion hostage to force the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor investigating the corrupt oligarch who's paying his son's $1 million a year salary? Did getting that prosecutor fired benefit that oligarch? And then Chairman Shaheen intervened. Yeah. See, this is what happens when politics becomes more important than truth. And it doesn't take somebody sitting in some high, far-flung committee room for the United States House of Representatives. Sometimes it can be a 19-year-old on a chat room on a talk radio show. You're listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If you want to join the chat room, you're perfectly welcome to do so. But remember, I'm reading what's there. So believe me, I will share it, and I will interact with you. This is The Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Coming up in just a couple of seconds, what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time talking about another contentious exchange. This one between John Kirby, the National Security Council coordinator, who was essentially speaking for the president regarding the DOD report about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Admiral Kirby, who, by the way, is one of the best public relations persons ever, was on television with Brian Kilmeade of Fox and Friends, and they both acquitted themselves brilliantly. And I normally don't play Fox News and all that. I normally don't do that. But what I can tell you is that this was so compelling, you need to see it. Because what it crystallized for me, it crystallized the dichotomy, the actual division between people who see things one way and people who see things another way. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And really enjoyed it. So there you go, for whatever that's worth. So telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. There are a couple of other things that we want to talk about here that are kind of important. Let's get to them. They both involve federal economic decision making. Okay. And this decision making involved Jerome Powell and the Fed. Apparently, they are prepared to slow down the pace of interest rate increases and is thinking about, in the month of December, raising the interest rate by, instead of 0.75 basis points, which is 3/4 of a point, perhaps raising it by half of a percentage point, or 50 basis points. You're going to see the Fed taper off these increases as the economy sort of cools off. And the Fed has done a masterful job at keeping keeping the inflation rates under 10%. I was absolutely sure that inflation was going to go over 10%. It may yet. But all I can say is that the Fed has absolutely done its job by cooling the economy. Now, is it too much? Well, it depends on who you ask. Elon Musk is very concerned that if the Fed continues raising interest rates anymore, that we're going to have a very deep recession. And that's possible. That's absolutely possible. But you have to keep something in mind. Remember, Elon Musk is very likely going to go to the Fed for some loans, or go to a bank for some loans that will be affected by the Fed continuing to raise interest rates. It's in his best interest to try to keep the Fed from raising the interest rates anymore. Now, what we're seeing is mighty fancy banking on the part of the Fed. And that's why they're the people they are, and that's why we have the monetary system that we have. Now, the question is, how deep is the coming recession going to be in 2023? It depends on how that fancy banking goes. If they add interest rates to 50 percentage points, 50 basis points, half of a point, and then maybe in January raise it, say, for example, 1/3 of a point, et cetera, then they may indeed find a soft landing. But that depends on a lot of different things. It depends on a lot of different things. One of the things that may indeed bring a soft landing will be the cessation of Biden administration spending, based on the fact that the Republicans actually own the House. We'll see. Once again. But I thought you'd like to know. Coming up, this is an amazing exchange between Brian Kilmeade of Fox News and John Kirby, who is the spokesperson for the National Security Council. It's next. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. Admiral John Kirby is the coordinator for the National Security Council. In other words, he talks to the press. He was doing that this morning on Fox and Friends. Brian Kilmeade, Steve Doocy, and so on. And what ended up happening was there was this remarkable exchange between John Kirby and Brian Kilmeade. It is so evocative that I thought what I would do is I'd go ahead and let you know about it. Hey, JD, can you say what time you have audio? Huh? What do you need me to do? You want me to tell you what time it is? Is that what you're asking me? I'm sorry. This might be important. Some people are saying maybe that the Facebook feed is lagging. It does lag a little bit, but I'm not exactly sure how much. What are you asking me, Gary? Go ahead and ask me. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and play this video. Watch it very carefully, because regardless of who you agree with in this conversation, both of these people are doing a magnificent job representing themselves. Take a look.
Let's talk about the Defense Department's annual report, because it is saying that Biden's fumbled withdrawal from Afghanistan was a propaganda gift to China. Do you agree with that?
No, I do not. And I don't know that that's the Pentagon's assessment that it was a propaganda gift to China. If anything, nations like China and Russia took a look at what we did in Afghanistan. And we've talked about this many, many times over the last year and had to marvel at the speed, the efficiency, and the effectiveness that a very small number of troops, Brian, you listen to me now and hear me out. A small number of troops were able to move that many Afghans safely out of that country. No other nation in the world can do that.
The way you withdrew is the issue, Admiral. The way our military moved in and out is a separate issue. Your Defense Department claimed as part of its annual report to Congress on national security developments, they suggest that China capitalized on the withdrawal to convince world leaders the U.S. is not a reliable ally. It's not Brian Kilmeade talking. It's your Defense Department. The PRC employed multiple diplomatic tools in an attempt to erode U.S. and partner influence, and it highlights the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The death of 13 and how many people we got out, that's one issue. But the way we did it, the way we promised that government would stand up, the way we're going to leave and have a transition, the disaster that took place is one of the many problems, along with the soldiers that are suffering now by the way you ended that 20-year war, not you, but the administration, is that China is using it. And you could argue that Russia invaded Ukraine because of it.
Brian, so the report said that China attempted to capitalize on it. That's a big difference from saying that they did or were able to capitalize on this. I mean, they spread propaganda about everything, Brian. You know that. But look at
how do you rate the way we left?
How strongly the international community has
Admiral.
rallied around Ukraine. China has not been able to succeed
Admiral, how
in
do
trying
you
to convince
characterize the
people
way
that
we
that
left?
was some sort of weakness by the United States.
As a military officer, forget about the people that got out because the government collapsed that you promised wouldn't. How do you characterize the way we left Afghanistan? Because most clear-thinking people say worse than the embarrassment of Saigon. What do you say?
I'll say the same thing to you, Brian, here today that I've said to you many, many times in the past. We have admitted and acknowledged that not everything about the withdrawal was done perfectly, that there were certainly mistakes made. We've investigated those mistakes. We've owned up for those mistakes.
The president never been briefed on it. The president has not taken a briefing. I know this for a fact. They had a report put together about what we're running in Afghanistan. The president wouldn't even take an oral brief on it. Why is that, Admiral?
It was the right thing to do for the president to end our war in Afghanistan, Brian. It was the right thing to bring our troops home. It was the right thing to be able to focus on other challenges like China and like Russia.
1,000 people in Afghanistan does not get your eye off the ball. We have a massive military. You could have left a few thousand in there and stop what we're witnessing now, which is a terror haven for Al-Qaeda. And guess what?
Brian,
Bin Laden's son is now back there.
Ask some Al-Qaeda leaders how safe they feel in Afghanistan right now.
You
after we just took out Zawahiri.
You killed one. There
we
are
killed
thousands back.
the titular leader of Al Qaeda inside Afghanistan, not just one, not just some guy on a street corner, Brian. It was a
How
very,
many
very
are back,
carefully
Admiral?
executed and very, very effective
How many
strike.
back? How many ISIS and Al Qaeda are back?
We said that Al Qaeda would be back in Afghanistan even before we left. They were starting to move back in, Brian, and we're watching it very closely. And the fact that we were able to execute that strike, the leader, by the way, not just some guy on a street corner, but the leader, tells you that our over-the-horizon counterterrorism capabilities are actually quite
So
effective.
he's the only one. If you had over-horizon capabilities, you would have killed more than one because thousands are back.
Brian, it is not about killing every single terrorist around the world on any given day. We watch these threats carefully, and when they develop to a degree where we think our national security is at risk,
How do
we
you
take
watch
action,
them? Our
and we did
assets
that.
have left. Our
We have-
assets have left.
We
You
have
know they're
over the
gone.
horizon. Brian, we have over the horizon capabilities. You and I have talked about this. I'm not saying that we have every single asset available to us that we did a year or so ago, but we have enough, and we're working to improve them every single day.
John Kirby joining us from the North Lawn of the White House. John,
All right, so there you see it. There you see two people actually doing their job. You see a government official interacting with a journalist who's asking tough and real questions. You see him answering them pretty well. Although the idea that John Kirby advanced in that you're not trying to get rid of every possible terrorist, baloney you're not. Brian Kilmeade made a good point when he said, if you had better over the horizon capability, you'd kill more than just one Al Qaeda person. The person he killed was the de facto leader of Al Qaeda. And what we have here is, and that's what John Kirby said. The problem with it is this. The problem with all of this is that this is how you explain the unexplainable. This is how you defend the indefensible. The way we left Afghanistan was a horror. It was worse than Saigon. It was terrible. It was horrific. And it left marks on this nation. It left marks on this nation that remain to this day. I'm talking about Saigon. We got similar problems now in Afghanistan. We're going to be seeing those pictures forever. And so once again, what you're seeing is an honest attempt by a journalist to get to what they consider to be the actual truth of what was an embarrassment to the United States, not said so by the reporter, but said so by the Department of Defense. And you see the guy who's the president's spokesperson doing his dead level best to define or defend the indefensible. Now the question is, and this would be the question I have for Kirby. Okay? I would sit there and say, sir, I'd say that because I'm an E8 and Admiral Kirby, I believe is a rear admiral. I would say that would be an 07. And I'd say, sir, let me think for a second. 06, 04, 05, 06, 07. Yes. Anyway, I just had to double check. Anyway, I would say, sir, do you find yourself in a position where in order to represent the interests of the president, you compromise the reality of your statement? That's not really a fair question because the only answer can be yes. The question isn't necessarily designed to elicit an actual answer. The question, the way I ask it, and this is why a lot of these people won't be on the show, is it gives you a window on the character of the person I'm asking. I suspect that what Admiral Kirby would say is, hell yes, happens all the time. I constantly fight with it. Yeah. That's what I think he'd say, because he's that kind of guy, at least from what I've seen. But we'll see whether he continues to be that guy. And so what you have here in this particular hour of the show is you have two interactions. One political, one journalistic, and political. The journalistic one everybody kind of looked good, even though I don't agree with Admiral Kirby's assessment. The political one is nothing more, especially when you consider the fact that those facts that Ted Cruz were actually discussing were honest, true, on the record facts. And the only way to mitigate the damage done to President Biden regarding that particular issue, and it just so happens it's the same issue, or actually it's an issue having to do with corruption in its Burisma. That was another issue we talked about. The only way to keep that from becoming a bigger mess was for the chairman of the committee to stop the answer, which she did. And Ted Cruz rightfully pointed out that you're covering the president. And she was. She should have said, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing, and moved on. But then again, this points out the last point I'm going to make on all this. Everybody has a pretty good idea what the truth is about all this stuff. We have a pretty good idea. You know why? Because there are shows like this, countless other shows, countless other ways for you to get news, aside from ABC, CBS, NBC. There are countless ways for you to get the news. And so consequently, we all have a pretty good idea what actually happened. And the rest of this stuff is just garbage. Whatever garbage you happen to believe in, whatever makes you feel better. If you watch MSNBC and see some sort of journalistic effort there that makes you feel better, okay. But I assure you that that's a joke. If you watch Fox News and you sit there and you go, gosh, you know, this really makes me feel better, and so on, then you have to say, I have to say to you, fine, they are less biased than MSNBC in a completely different direction, but they're still biased. USA Today is biased left, but not nearly as biased left as ABC, CBS, and NBC. CNN is bravely trying to fix it. I don't know whether they're going to be successful. I'd like to help them. Because what I bring to this broadcast is I bring what I consider to be clear-eyed vision of what the truth actually is. That's why I engage with the people that believe otherwise. That's why I engage with people that, and some of the people say, hey, you need to just ignore those guys. No, I don't. Because they move the conversation forward. These are things that are essential. This dialogue is essential. And the lesson that we learn from Jeanne Shaheen cutting off the interaction between a witness and Senator Cruz proves my theory about propaganda. Propaganda is not a process where you add things to the narrative. It's a process where you take things away. That is what's going on here. What you see is these mainstream media news outlets not giving you the whole story. And that's why I try to fill in the gaps. It's incredibly difficult. And that's why nobody does it. That's why nobody does it. But then again, I guess I'm just stupid enough to try, I suppose. I don't know what else to do. I'm just not going to do anything else but tell you the truth. Now, there is something else. There is something else I have to point out. Somebody said in this chat room today that until CNN divorces commentary from their news reporting, they'll stay in the cellar forever. And I'm wondering whether or not I'm making the same mistake. Am I making the same mistake? I report the news. I tell you what I think about it. I'm pretty sure that I'm telling you the truth. But there are people even on this chat room that think that I'm some sort of arch politician trying to spin things, which is not the case. So when I talk about how difficult this job is, it's not that I'm complaining. But think about the sophistication of what is a propaganda effort disguised as news in the United States, and how difficult it is to untangle all of it and actually find the real pieces of the puzzle and then assemble them properly and then report that to you. All the while listening to the din of people that say, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. This is wrong because of that, and that's wrong because of this, and blah, 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 blah. And the problem with all that is you can't trust anybody. You can't. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. That's twice. Started the show by forgetting to turn my mic on, ending the show by forgetting to put my mic on. Oops. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The ball keeps on bouncing. You know, when it comes to all of this, the ball keeps on bouncing. A business executive who has been tapped earlier this year to serve another term on President Biden's advisory council on doing business in Africa, PAC DBIA, previously worked as a senior advisor to Hunter Biden's now defunct investment firm and strategized with the younger Biden on brokering deals in Western Africa years prior to his appointment to his current position. In short, the way this works out is this: a Biden administration commerce appointee is a longtime business partner of Hunter Biden. On July 14th, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo reappointed John Nevergola, or Nevergole, I think it's Nevergola, co-founder and CEO of the Philadelphia-based project development firm ABD Group, and 23 others to serve a 2-year term on the PAC doing business in Africa from 2022 to 2024. Nevergola and ABD Group Executive Chairman Mohammed Kaita, the son-in-law of former Malayan President Amadou Toumani Touré, co-founded the company over 15 years ago. They currently promote the company as a trusted partner to investors, multinational firms, and African governments with over $2.5 billion US dollars of investment across the continent. Today, ABD Group has a presence on the ground to develop projects in every major market in Western, East, Central, and East and Southern Africa. Partners include Fortune 500 companies and the world's largest emerging market investors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting about that is CNN Philippines reported in 2020 the state-owned CACC, the China Airport Construction Corporation, was one of the subsidiaries of the China Communications Construction Company that was blacklisted by the Trump administration. Well, not so much anymore. An archived version of the website shows that Hunter Biden was listed as a member of the ABD Board of Advisors for several years until his bio was removed sometime between January 23rd and May 29th of 2019. Nevergola was serving as the CEO of ABD. He was simultaneously serving as a senior advisor to Rosemont Seneca Advisors. It appears his association with Rosemont Seneca in his ABD bio was also erased from the website shortly after March of 2019. You see, when they start putting this stuff together, when they start going after all of these things, there's not going to be much for President Biden to hide behind. Because these suspicious incident reports from U.S. banks where money changes hands, one mistake in any of those, and they're going to have to explain them all. One mistake in any of those. And while I do not believe in putting presidents in jail, and I would not support doing the same thing with Joe Biden, I will tell you this. History for presidents of the United States, history is far more harsh than jail time or the embarrassment of being charged or any of it. History will judge these presidents for good or ill. That's why we, the people of the United States, don't have to chase one down and throw him in jail. History will handle it and just allow it to work out. Keep searching for truth. Keep reporting the news honestly. Let the political pieces fall where they may. And if there is something that I can speak up for on the Wells Report, is that I don't care about the politics. I don't care who is buoyed or who is damaged based on the news. Doesn't make any difference to me. What makes a difference to me is the truth. And it needs to make a difference to you. And if you catch yourself saying something that isn't true based on your politics, for God's sake, stop. For God's sake, stop. Go out and do what I do. I've done it today on this broadcast. I was talking about a margin of victory regarding a vote. And what I did was I went out there and said, well, the actual margin was 220,000 votes. We were talking about how many votes Ted Cruz defeated Beto O'Rourke in his Senate run in 2016. And the person came back, well, Texas is a red state. And I came right back with, if you add up Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Nevada all together, you get somewhere around 200,000 votes. That's how many votes Joe Biden defeated President Trump in those 4 states. And it's still not 220,000 votes. But so what I was doing is I was trying to deprogram these people who refuse to believe reality and using logic as a way to try to get them to see the truth. Maybe I'm wasting my time, but I sure hope not. Thanks for watching the Wells Report today. We'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you and yours. Be safe. Make good decisions. See you. And just like that, there we go. All righty then. By the way, thank you so much for all those wonderful things. Thank you for all those things that you said. Let's see. I'll never trust the mainstream media again after the last couple of years. John Beal says, I report the facts. I do. It's good to hear other people's viewpoint, but the actual truth is what matters, says Margie. Correct. I don't see how anybody, yeah, that was me. Still here with you. I appreciate how you deconstruct the other side's arguments. I'm just trying to get to the truth. I'm trying to get to the truth. And if the other side has the truth, then I'm reporting it. I think the difference would be that if you actually use facts to support my commentary as opposed to speculation, rhetoric, and hyperbole. Correct. I do. I do a lot of if-thens. You know, if you are familiar with old computer languages, if then, blah, 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 blah. I do a lot of that. Eddie Jones asked the correct question. Who knows the truth? Exactly. Who knows the truth? It's sort of like a famous Supreme Court justice when he was asked how he knows he's seeing pornography. I know pornography. I know it when I see it. Yeah. So I know the truth when I see it. And so do you. Everything these days is murky. By design. By design. Let's see. What else? FedEx and UPS are tracking gun sales. So's the FBI. That's what those forms are that we fill out at every FFL. Let's see. I think that's a lost cause, trying to tell the truth. It may be. It may be. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep telling the truth until they take it away from me. Yeah, that's a 24-hour time clock. I have to nudge it every now and then. It's not exactly correct. It's close, though. Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty darn close, actually. It's actually right on time. How funny. All right. God bless all y'all. Okay, take good care. I'm going to go ahead and wander off now. And by the way, I do want a kudo or two on my way out the door. All right? When I go back to the beginning of this tape and listen to my voice at the beginning of this tape, it sounds like this. There's nothing there. But let me tell you something. Because of my voice teacher and the work that I did while I was off the air to keep my voice, all the things she taught me is why I can talk to you now. My voice is in better shape now than it was at the beginning, instead of the other way around, which is what you might think. So anyway, I feel like crap, but I was here. Now I'm going to go find some Kleenex because my nose is running. Peace, love, joy.